From Photonics Media, this is All Things Photonics, a podcast where we explore industry-shaping advancements in lasers, optics, imaging, metrology, and sensing. Each episode, we'll speak with some of the brightest minds in industry and research about the trends shaping the landscape of photonics.
Today's episode is brought to you by Hamamatsu Corporation, a leading manufacturer of devices for the generation and measurement of infrared, visible, UV light, and X-rays. Hamamatsu is dedicated to the advancement of photonics through extensive research and offers specialized systems for select applications. Visit hamamatsu.com to learn more.
For many of us, our introduction to holography was accompanied by the words, "Help me, Obi-Wan Kenobi, you're my only hope." Science fiction is a bit of a give and take. Real scientific advancements inspire authors and filmmakers who inspire researchers, and the cycle continues. Sometimes, as is the case for many of the futuristic technologies that we've seen on film, science fiction doesn't always stay that way. Holography, as it appears in movies, remains aspirational. But as you'll learn from today's guest, we're getting close. Avalon Holographics is developing 3D holographic displays that can be viewed with the naked eye. The company's flagship product, NOVAC, is finding use in the military and medical fields. But CEO Wally Haas sees a path to bring the technology to offices, laboratories, theme parks, and living rooms around the world. Up next, our conversation with Wally Haas, CEO of Avalon Holographics. During my time at Photonics Media, I've seen a fair amount of holographic displays that maybe don't quite meet the proper definition, but certainly do fit in with what the public thinks of when they hear the word hologram. So I guess to start off, what is a holographic display, and what are the component technologies that come together to make it work?
Okay, I appreciate that. So as you have already talked a little bit about and used, is that lots of people think of many different things when they think of hologram. Like a hologram comes from ancient Greek, which means full information or full record. And so when people think of hologram, they think of an object, a real object that behaves like a real object, but it's made of light. So when it was originally conceived, when that term was first coined, it was around splitting a very pure source of light and having that light scatter off objects and then be collected on a medium. If you then re-illuminate that medium like a photography emulsion with that same reference light, you get the visual information back through phase reconstruction, and that's how most people, and certainly holographic purists, think of what a hologram is. But most people just think of a hologram as Star Wars, Star Trek, Avatar, things like that. And so if you produce an image that seems free-floating, that seems like it's there, some people will consider it a hologram. But really the only way you should consider something to be a hologram is if you faithfully reproduce the light field, which is the light that would scatter off of an object if real light hit it. That's what a hologram is. So if we kind of think a little bit about what people have traditionally thought about holograms, there's beam splitters, or something called Pepper's Ghost, which is you have a nice, beautifully thin and clean piece of glass or transparency. You shine light at it, and then that light reflects usually towards the audience. So think of like the Tupac and some of these shows where the audience sits a long way away and they just sort of see this sort of ghost appear. Some people think that's a hologram. That's the same effect that when the lights are off and your home is bright and you see the reflected image of yourself at night in your windows, that's the beam splitter. You're just having light reflect off something and come in. And then there's other objects where like Microsoft really did no one any good services when you talk about holography as a VR device or AR device where two people are getting images. But for real holography, what you need is real light. And so we define holography as light field holography, which is you have to reproduce light the way that it exists in the real world, and therefore you have to produce billions and billions of beams of light in the same way that your eyes would accept these near infinite wavefronts of light to see an object. So we define holography as recreating the light field. That
Excellent.
might be a tiny bit longer technical, but that's the way I like to look at it.
Oh, no worries, no worries. Our audience enjoys technical.
Okay.
So now, when we look back at a lot of the old science fiction media, we'll see a fair amount of technology that's since become reality, like the comm systems of Star Trek, and to some extent, like the directed energy systems. Now, I understand that you took some inspiration from Iron Man 2 when you founded this company. Seeing Tony Stark in his lab manipulating 3D projections of like blueprints and maps and things like that.
Yeah.
How close are we to that level of capability?
So that's a fun question. So absolutely, this is my second company. I sold my first one to Intel back in 2010. I was the senior director there, but I was kind of getting a bit restless, and I was kind of looking for something maybe to do. And Iron Man 2 had come out, just as you had mentioned. And there's Tony Stark in the middle of his lab, and he scans his father's expo in the hopes of finding a new element. So, but and that's what inspired this company. I absolutely love that scene. I love sort of imagining the future. But as I got into understanding what holography is, how humans see objects, how we perceive things, light has to come from an object and enter our eyes. Like that's the light field. As you look around, light is coming from a light source, the sun, the lamp, or it's reflecting, refracting, or diffracting off objects, scattering, and coming into our eyes. So when we think about what is happening in that Iron Man 2 scene, light is being produced from free space and coming into the eyes of the observer, the camera, the individual, and it doesn't matter where you are. That's effectively a screenless display, but you still have perspective as you move around. You get to see something different. That seems, I believe, impossible. I'm not really sure if anyone can come up with a solution there, especially something perspective, because again, light has to come from that point in space and be perspective dependent as if that object was really there. So for Iron Man 2, that's probably farther off than I can imagine. Whereas something like the Star Trek holodeck, that is much more realistic and makes much more sense other than being able to touch the hologram. Because if you look at a screen surface and you had infinite capability of generating vectors of light, color, direction, intensity from each of the points on that wall, on the floor, on the ceiling, you would be able to faithfully recreate the vectors of a real light field. And so you would be able to stand in those immersive environments. You'd be able to look around and it would all look real. So something like the Star Trek holodeck is much more realistic than having light just appear in front of you and being able to put your hand through it and it reflect off your skin and things like that. So some movies good, some movies not so good.
Right. Awesome. Now, I don't know if this is a question that we'll be able to necessarily answer, but maybe we can do a little bit of conjecture. What kind of advancements need to be made in order to reach the levels of functionality that we see in science fiction? Whether that's the Iron Man 2 or whether that's the holodeck, whichever we might be able to explain better. It sounds more like the holodeck than the Iron Man 2.
Yeah, so it's a great question. I appreciate that. The way to kind of think about the light field and how to reproduce it is it's all about the density of the data that you can produce and how many different vectors of light that you can produce. So you can kind of imagine from a point in space, if you can shoot rays of light of incredibly high angular density or directional density, so 0.000001 directional intensity in a single direction, and you could do that across the entire field of view, and you had as infinitely small of those dots such that you could reproduce all of those angles, then you would be able to faithfully reproduce a light field. So Avalon has produced basically the highest density, most compact light field display ever produced. We call it the NOVAC display. We're happy to show it. We've got a number of demo sites, and it has 5 billion rays of light in a 40-inch diagonal. And so with about roughly 80-degree field of view. So that produces an incredibly awesome hologram. You can put your hand through it. Everybody can stand around it. You can move around it. It's great. But it just reaches that threshold of, okay, I get it. I get this is a hologram. I get this is a light field. It's good enough for my intended purposes. The way to get it better is you have to increase the density of the individual rays of light. So basically make smaller light emission sources. If you want to call them pixels, fine. That doesn't matter. But you need to produce more rays of light and pack them tighter in order for you to produce all of those rays. And then you need to find a way to control them. One of my favorite statistics around the NOVAC holographic display is it uses almost 5 terabits per second of data, which is almost 5% of the average internet traffic in the US, or at least a couple of years ago. So it's just a massive data problem, but the holographic displays are really a holistic kind of thing. You need the software to run it. You need the chips to be able to control it and do all the bandwidth. And then you need the light emission that reproduces the light field. So we're not that far away from making very high quality holograms that the world is going to love. And I would even say that the NOVAC holographic display is already there, which had a number of people see it that just love it. It's just you have to see it to appreciate it. But it's really a question of cost at this time. These things are pretty expensive to start, but they'll be inexpensive over time, and eventually everybody, I truly believe, is going to have holographic displays in their homes, whether it be a tabletop for watching games or a wall-sized display for that immersive, interactive experience with others. It's just going to be awesome.
Now, can you tell us a little bit about sort of the things that you're working on with the NOVAC system? What are you trying to make better? And I guess it would probably speak to the cost aspect of it, since these are, as I understand it, very expensive to produce and then of course to sell. What are your current focuses?
Yeah, so that's actually a two-stage question. So we produced the NOVAC because it solves some very important but relatively narrow operational problems. So when we think about defense, it's really about operational awareness, the common operating picture, the ability to have a mission planning and mission briefing with a number of people all standing around it to have that sort of common picture, that situational awareness, whether they're doing the planning, the briefing, or after action, that allows them to understand holographically what happened or what is happening or what will happen in real life. Because when you can see that model and you see the spatial awareness, especially with the complexity that has to happen in a lot of these dangerous missions, that's why this display is very, very useful. That the ability to understand holographically the environment that you might need to operate in is incredibly valuable. And when we look at the medical use cases, it's a lot all around education, consultation, and planning, like surgery planning. Being able to see the holographic reconstruction of tissue and understand the planning, understand the issues that are going to go into it, really makes a lot of capability and sense when it comes to being able to make surgeries faster, safer, better recovery times for the patient. So what we're using it now is those really high value use cases, but the reason that they make sense is because of the cost of the display. But the reason that display costs so much is because of the off-the-shelf parts. Even though we put them together in a very bespoke way, is that the cost of the components are very, very high, because in order to produce billions and billions of rays of light, you effectively have to have thousands and thousands of TVs stuffed into the space of one TV. So, and then you have to have a complex optical system that reshapes all of the light. So, but there's nothing fundamental around the light emission or the phase, the wavefront reconstruction and being able to reproduce the light field. And so we're fundraising now actually to reduce the cost by like 90%. But there's a pathway to make these very large holographic displays basically as inexpensive as the TVs that your listeners that might be watching us on, or large TVs or theaters, even into your phone eventually, because the light emission is roughly the same amount of energy for a holographic display as it is for a 2D display, because you're only making rays of light versus domes of light. You just integrate those rays over the dome, and boom, you've got the same luminance. So you do lose a tiny bit of power there, but then there's also the control. But again, it's around the control of the individual rays. So when we think about what are the use cases now, they're incredibly high value, high consequence visualization cases. But as we move forward, when you look at the digital twins, when you look at immersive experiences, theme parks, retail, being able to be in a immersive environment, trying to interact with others, trying to interact with your digital data, being able to interact with it in a way that gives you insights. Like one of the things that gets me a bit excited is that AI is doing such a great job in terms of being able to understand your data and give you answers around it, but then you want to potentially visualize what that is. So for example, if you have a digital twin perhaps of a turbine or something like that, say, okay, my AI agent, please show me the next expected failure of this turbine. And then you would be able to zoom in holographically, understand from a human perspective, okay, this is the expected failure. This is what I should do next. This is why I should do it. Oh, now that I've seen it, maybe there's some other failures that might be predicted. So over time, the holographic use case just widens out so much. And so it's just exciting to imagine all the things. And there's definitely things that I can't even imagine right now that people would want a holographic display to visualize, whether it be games, entertainment, enterprise, healthcare, lots. It's hard to predict. It's going to be great.
Right. Yeah. No, it's exciting stuff. I wonder if there are any, sort of scientific advancements that you're looking at now, or that you've seen in the news, maybe that you've been thinking like, oh, this might be good for this display to make it cheaper or things like that. I think you'd mentioned something kind of similar to a TV in there, and you need a certain level of pixel density. Micro LEDs are kind of on their way up. Is that something that might be able to help the cost?
So there's definitely technologies that are being produced right now that certainly add to the tailwind of what we're trying to do. So while micro LEDs in and of themselves probably don't help us that much, the material science that is going into how to produce the micro LEDs almost certainly is. So, for example, a micro LED, what they do is they take a silicon wafer, monocrystalline silicon wafer, print the circuit on it using implantation like a normal chip, and then we'll put OLEDs generally on it. So that's micro OLEDs. If you're talking about micro LEDs, that's a tiny different thing. Right. But the OLED technology, the pattern technology, that creates sort of very small, very bright, really great sort of AR and VR glasses. And so there's a lot of good technology there for shrinking OLEDs and being able to produce them. Micro LEDs, those are generally, again, monocrystalline LEDs that have incredibly high efficiency, incredibly good brightness. But the reason that's good is for like a 2D area. Like if you're making a big OLED screen, you might need a quite large area relatively for the OLED material in order to create that beautiful brightness, the contrast. And if you take that big area and replace it with a tiny, smaller micro LED, then you could still reproduce that beautiful brightness, and human persistence allows you to see it. And so like that kind of crystalline technology and the layering of it, that also has useful applications for holography, as long as you can make them all super tight and make them tiny and do all the transfers. There's great advancements in GPUs because the bandwidth that I mentioned before that is required in order to drive billions and billions and eventually trillions of pixels requires some pretty heavy math. And GPUs are getting better and better at producing that math, allowing those algorithms to advance over time. And so the advancements that AMD and especially NVIDIA are doing with their GPUs and the bandwidth that allow those that are being enabled more and more from those GPUs are real tailwinds in terms of making large-scale holographic displays, which is really what everybody wants.
I wonder if you could kind of speak to the some of the specific contributors and kind of like the major contributors to the expense of this technology.
Yeah, the number one expense in our projector-based holographic displays is in the light emission. So the way that works is we use a LCOS, so liquid crystalline silicon imager from a major supplier, very high quality. But in order for that imager to work, it requires a driver. That driver then drives LEDs, goes through a complex optical system, hits the imager. You produce the millions of rays of light, goes through even more complex optical imaging in order to produce all of the different rays. And the body of that projector, the optics that are in it, the imager itself, the driver that's in it, all of that is like 90% of the cost of one of our displays. But if you just replace all of that with OLEDs or some other light emission device that you can pack super, super tightly and recreate the wavefront of a light ray that produces a light field, you can reduce that cost significantly. And so like that's what we're working towards and have been basically for the last 10 years. Semiconductor is incredibly difficult area to do, but I can kind of consider it high precision baking. Like the hard part is the recipe, right? Getting the first chocolate cake, but once you get one chocolate cake, you can make 10,000, right? So right. Like that's the hard part that takes so long. But we've done some great stuff and we're getting closer.
Excellent. Yeah, that reminds me. My my girlfriend and I we made a chocolate cake for I think it was Thanksgiving or something, and we had my mom's recipe, and they came out horrible.
No.
Because it's the recipe is just perfectly fine tuned to my mom's oven, which is different from every other oven. So you've really got to dial in that recipe. In order to make
exactly.
Right.
Where do you get the ingredients? What is your oven? How long does it take to prepare? What are the different pressures, right? And that's what makes semiconductor both exciting and frustrating, is that there's so many factors that go into making it work. But once it works, it's magic.
Yeah. Once it works, you can do it every time.
Yeah.
Awesome. Now, we've already kind of touched on this, but it's fun to talk about. It's exciting. What do you envision for the future of this technology? What sort of use cases would you like to see? And what kind of impact do you envision this technology having?
Yeah, that's a great question. Honestly, eventually, monumental impact. I think it will touch practically everybody. We spend more time on our screens than we do sleeping. But the reason we do is because that's where we get a lot of our information. That's how we interact with our day-to-day and sometimes a lot of people. But everybody wants to talk to other people. and eventually having a holographic wall that allows you to talk to your friends, your family, your loved ones that aren't in the next room but can look like they are. That is just so exciting for me. I think my mom lives 4,000 kilometers away from me on the other side of Canada, and I don't get a chance to visit her very often. But a couple of years ago, we had just great chat for hours, and I just sat in a chair and she sat in her couch, and being able to recreate that would just be unbelievable. But there's more than that. Like, I think of entertainment use cases, being able to see a holographic display, being able to bring a digital environment to real life, being able to see Avatar or have Darth Vader come out towards you, or there's just so many sort of entertainment, immersive, interesting things that really are only limited by a creative director's mind, that would then allow you to be truly immersed in this just incredible environment. So I kind of think of that from a sort of large scale. From a smaller scale, I think there's going to be a lot of very useful sort of insights and capabilities from a UI perspective, from a data and day-to-day interaction perspective. I think that, for example, like obviously decades ago when the mouse and the UI first came out, about being able to effectively use a screen and be able to interact with your data much better. It's hard to even comprehend what would be the best way to interact with a holographic screen. But once you get that UI and unlock it, oh my God, there's so many things that are possible. And so I think that from a productivity perspective, capability, a supervisory role, like AI agents are going to be everywhere, but there's got to be humans paying attention to them, looking at the results, directing these agents to do good things. And so you're going to need to be able to spatially understand what they're doing, why they're doing it in a very quick way. And humans are incredible at being able to recognize patterns, being able to work with 3D data, because that's, we live in a 3D environment. So I think a lot of enterprise applications. I think of playing games, being able to play Mech Warrior, giant robots fighting giant aliens in a Tokyo cityscape would be amazing. And then finally, I hope I don't anger any of your listeners, but I'm a big fan of the Buffalo Bills. Watching football on a holographic screen, I would lose my mind. I would just love it. Like, I love going to live football games, having that stadium experience, being able to look down, see the play, but then have all the benefits of computer-generated content like overlay, replay, all of that stuff. It'd just be incredible. So, yeah, there's just, and these are just the things off the top of my head. There's more that I thought of, and there's almost infinitely more that other people will be able to kind of imagine and think about. So it's just a super bright future for holographic displays, I think.
With that, we conclude another episode of All Things Photonics. Thank you to our sponsors, to the technical staff behind the scenes, and to continued support from the Photonics Media editorial team. As always, questions, comments, thoughts, and ideas are welcome. Let us know how we're doing via email at allthings@photonics.com. All Things Photonics is available on all major platforms and on our website, photonics.com.